So earlier this morning, when we were talking about the conversations we were going to have, we said we'll have our Justice Thursday conversation, and then we'll also talk about the Kenya-USA 60 years of diplomatic relations. And we said our guest is going to come, and the guest is the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce, Kenya, and his name is Maxwell Okello. And people online started saying, Okello Max.
For real, he's coming.
For real, he's coming. Kumbe, he's a CEO. No. Are you Okello Max?
I can officially confirm that I am Maxwell Okello.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not Okello Max.
Not Okello Max.
Of no relation whatsoever, okay?
No relation whatsoever.
And even if we even reverse your names, you're not the musician.
Definitely not.
Okay.
I mean, I do have some musical aspirations, but certainly not Okello Max.
But you leave them
not to that level yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
But you can do like a number here. It's okay.
Hey, take it easy, man. We are here for a different purpose, isn't it?
At the end of the day, maybe you'll actually be incited enough to feel, let me drop one.
Let's see.
Maxwell Okello, CEO, American Chamber of Commerce, Kenya. Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you, sir.
It's good to have you here.
Great.
Good to have you here. Our colleague CT is not in. He said tukuachie salamu nyingi sana kwa gunia.
Shukran.
But he also left me with the day's proverb. And the job for you is to listen to the proverb and give us your interpretation of it. The proverbs for this week, CT says they are from the Republic of the Gambia. Today's proverb: he who sleeps on a borrowed mat is sleeping on a cold, very cold ground. He who sleeps on a borrowed mat is sleeping on a cold, very cold ground. What's your interpretation of this?
He who sleeps on a cold mat is sleeping on a borrowed mat is sleeping on a cold ground. That's a tough one. Could it be that perhaps you are not in control? You are basically dependent on what you've borrowed, and therefore you are exposed. You're at the mercy of your host or whoever it is you're borrowing this from.
Excellent. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It does make perfect sense. So basically the lesson here is, as long as you are on borrowed stuff, you're not comfortable. And you cannot be comfortable. Right?
Correct.
And the encouragement here is, get your own mat, man. This is it.
Yeah.
Get your own mat.
Gain control.
Gain control.
Yeah.
So Ednah had given us the Swahili version of this. Suruali ya kwazima haisitiri matako.
All right.
Suruali ya kwazima haisitiri matako. It's the same. Saying exactly the same thing. Suruali, you know what suruali is?
Yes.
Pants.
Yes.
Kwazima is to borrow.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Sitiri would be what? Fit. Right? Okay.
Oh. Okay.
You get it?
I'm trying to put the words together. Yeah. I get it.
You get it?
So what you bought, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't fit.
Your bottoms will not be comfortable
On somebody else's pants.
on somebody else's pants, on borrowed pants.
Right, got it. Yeah.
So you're just walking there and, there's something. There's no fit.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit you because they're not yours. Yeah. So Maxwell, American Chamber of Commerce, we had the 2024 AmCham Business Summit last month.
Or
And then
the month before,
the
actually.
month before, that was in April.
That was April, yes.
And then we saw, then that followed by the publicly publicized visits by Kenya's president to the USA on a state visit. And on that, he also had some meetings with business leaders in America. There were business leaders who came to visit here in the country. I mean, it was well attended. Just tell us, first of all, about AmCham before we go into the AmCham Business Summit and how you support business.
Well, thank you, Eric and Ndu, for having me this morning. So the American Chamber of Commerce is a business network of American companies in Kenya, or American companies that have interest in Kenya, together with local companies that are affiliated to those American businesses. So local companies that are doing business as part of the ecosystem of the American companies in Kenya. Our mandate is primarily twofold. First and foremost, to represent those companies on matters relating to policy, regulatory, legislative, basically the business climate or the business environment that impact their ability to effectively or optimally operate in the country. And then secondly, to promote bilateral trade and investment between Kenya and the US. So we currently have north of 250 companies in our membership. And this is a good spread across various sectors, from health to technology to agriculture to security to, there are so many different sectors that are represented, manufacturing and so on. So that briefly is what we do. We work very closely with both governments, the US government, the Kenya government, as well as the local private sector. We are part of the local private sector here, and indeed do have local companies that have direct commercial engagement with the US. So think of exporters of Kenyan produce into the US, or importers of American products into the country are also part of the network.
Tell us, of these 250 members, I'm sure there are 250 plus members.
Yes.
Or is it exact 250?
No. Plus. Could be somewhere in the 260-ish range, yes.
How many of them are actual American companies with business in Kenya?
That would be a split. It would be just about half of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the rest are American companies with interest in Kenya and Kenyan companies
Correct.
trading in America.
Correct.
Or with affiliates in America.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. It's a high number of American companies in Kenya.
Yeah, our estimation is that there's probably, if you talk about pure American companies, or companies with significant American investment in them, that would be north of 250 for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe closer to 300.
So essentially, there's an understanding between governments whereby these businesses are set up here. Do we see the same thing reciprocated on the other side, where there are Kenyan businesses to the number of 250, maybe less, being able to get through on this? So is it an open channel spread between both countries?
It is an open channel. We would like to see more Kenyan companies also set up in the US. I don't have an exact number that I can talk about. However, we do know that there are Kenyan companies, or would I say Kenyan-owned companies in the US, mainly by diasporan Kenyans in the US, who've set up and are either doing business in the US or actually bringing US products into Kenya. So that's there.
Okay.
What is AmCham formally recognized by the government of Kenya?
Yes, it is.
How so?
AmCham is a registered limited liability company in Kenya, but limited by guarantee. So we are a not-for-profit entity. We have a board of trustees, directors actually, comprising of members who are elected at an annual general assembly as directors of the organization to oversight the affairs of the chamber. So I report into a board of directors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when the Ministry of Trade, for example, is dealing with AmCham, how do you deal? Do you deal as the ministry, the government, dealing with a recognized association of businesses, a representation of businesses, or do they look at you as, okay, so you're AmCham, you're one company, maybe you're representing others, or maybe you're not? Is it possible that, basically I just want to understand the legal engagement. If you had an engagement with, say, the Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Finance, or whichever, what would be on record?
It would be the business association. It's an industry association. I think that's probably a better term to use. It's an industry association. And as I've said, we represent that body, that ecosystem of American and local companies affiliated and are at the nexus of the US-Kenya trade and investment relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of needs do these companies have?
Well, it varies. I've talked about the policy regulatory representation. So a good example would be the finance bills being published. It definitely has impact from a business climate perspective. And so we made submissions, as any other industry association did, on what we feel should be reviewed or looked at as far as the business climate is concerned. So that's one. Then two is the need for market information. So we provide our network with market information. So our network being the network that's here, but we also partner very closely with the US Chamber in the US. And so through that, then we're able to provide information back and forth that would be useful, especially for understanding the market, understanding the opportunities that there, understanding the legislative and policy space that would help companies make strategic decisions when it comes to investing in Kenya and so on. Then the third area is that we are a big convener of one, public-private engagements, right? So this would be of a policy nature mainly, but also from a commercial perspective. So the AmCham summit that you mentioned earlier is our flagship platform and one that we host on an annual basis to bring together local private sector, US private sector, but also government, US government and Kenya, East Africa government representatives to drive policy that would help enhance bilateral trade and investment between the US, Kenya, and the region, but as well bring in an opportunity or create an opportunity for private sector to engage amongst themselves, strike or initiate commercial cooperation and deals as far as that is possible. Yeah.
What is the ground like? And I think this is interesting here because if we're one of the big drivers, then as has been spelt out by Kenya, is that to invite foreign investment into the country. And that would essentially see some points on the index rise because, of course, then there's a lot more flowing in terms of foreign exchange, etc. What does the ground look like if we're now getting into the nitty-gritty of it and saying that for, some 250 odd businesses from the US to be operational in Kenya, then it would appear as though the ground is favorable for investment. Is that the case?
It is, by and large.
I feel a but coming on.
By and large, it is not the perfect situation. Let me put it that way. The very fact, to your point, the very fact that you have these companies operating, and I would want to imagine a significant of them thriving in this environment, then it points to opportunity, and it points to a climate that is favorable to a large extent for those companies. Now, where the challenge is that for us to be able to make those companies excel, to make them be able to grow and expand and invest more in this market, to attract others as well, we need to consistently keep improving our investment climate, our business climate. And given the situation in our country currently, there are certain reforms that are being made to enhance the business environment. But at the same time, there are certain recommendations that we are seeing that would negatively impact or put a chill on the potential of attracting more foreign direct investment into the country.
Give us examples of both. On the one side, when you talk about recommendations that are being made that would enhance, and then those that are being made that would essentially throttle a business.
All right, so let me start with what would enhance? A simple example would be, and this has been resolved, but I'll use it as an example. If you remember, we used to have a law that required that any company coming to play in the ICT space, especially the regulated part of it, would need 30% local shareholding. That was a significant barrier. Now, the president, to his credit, did make an undertaking to remove that 30% local shareholding requirement for ICT companies. And when that was done, it unlocked AWS investment into Kenya. So that's an example.
Who's AWS?
Oh, sorry, Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services, right? So they came in, they set up, this happened sometime, I think the second half of last year. So that's an example. Now, on the negative side, you saw a proposal for a significant economic presence tax that is seen to be replacing DST, which is currently at 1.5%. I think the significant economic tax is proposed at 6%. Now, where this becomes a problem is, as you know, the digital service taxes are quite controversial globally. And this particular tax is specific to non-resident companies.
Yes.
Right? So the sort of companies that we would be trying to push into the country.
Yeah.
And some were already here as well. So what is the signaling that is sending out? If on the one hand you're saying, hey, welcome to the Silicon Savannah. Yeah. And you're doing all you can to create a drumbeat for the country, to attract tech companies and so on. But at the same time, you're putting in measures such as this, or you're proposing measures such as this that may not be favorably looked at when it comes to the perception of the country being a favorable investment destination for companies in that tech space, then we have a problem.
Who would be hit by this tax? The significant economic presence tax?
Well, it's non-resident companies.
What does that mean?
It means companies that are not registered here. They don't have residency in the country, but are benefiting from an economic perspective.
What does residency mean? Because I get confused with that. If a company, you've given an example of AWS. If an AWS established an office in Nairobi, would it become a resident company?
They would need to be registered here.
Okay.
Yes.
So if it's not registered here with a business registration service, but it's operating in Kenya, then it's not a resident company.
It's considered not a resident company.
And that attracts the significant economic presence tax.
Correct.
At 6% of gross revenues. You'll tell us more about this. Just get to understand what this means and then how that will impact the environment. So we know because we've sat with the Principal Secretary for Investment, right where you're seated, that the government's agenda is to attract foreign direct investment into the country. Come, set up, operate, run business in Kenya. And there's a target. Is it $10 billion a year?
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. So how are we doing in that? And how would these proposals then impact that kind of ambition? Maxwell Okello is the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce, Kenya. How do you call it? Kenya chapter or just Kenya?
Kenya.
Okay.
Or AmCham Kenya.
Yeah, you have to say American Chamber of Commerce. So then eventually we'll say AmCham. The AmCham Kenya, he's the CEO. He's here with us today talking about the relationship between Kenya and USA and the very many American companies that are investing in Kenya, and also the Kenyan companies that are affiliated to American companies that are trading in Kenya and also in the USA. You said some of the good things, like what happened last year on the issue of the 30% local shareholding requirement, which the president committed to saying, let's waive this. And we've seen then ICT companies coming in. But the waiver was being sought specifically for ICT companies, right?
Yes.
Or was it for all? It was
No,
specific
that was specific to
Why?
the
Why
law.
do ICT companies not want us to own part of shareholding in them? Kuja hapa, ongea na Eric. Why? What's the downside of that requirement?
Most of these companies that we're talking about are publicly listed companies in the US. And so how do they cede 30% of that to local? As in, what would be the structure and the mechanism for doing that? So that's one. Okay. And then two is the valuations. We are talking multi-billion dollar companies. So 30% valuation is no joke, right? So those are some of the barriers or the challenges that a law such as that then was presenting for these companies when it comes to getting into the market. Yeah.
Look on the other side of things, because we're looking at, like we said, an exchange of the same idea. Are doors open on the other side, and we have less stringent measures when it comes to Kenyan companies that operate in the United States?
I think that to set up in the United States and get your company going, there's actually very minimal restrictions. It should be easy, especially if you go to jurisdictions such as Delaware, where you are able to set up your company and get your business going. As you know, that's a land of free enterprise, and they've made it such that it's easy for you to get into the space where you can transact your business and grow it. So I don't have any specific instances where there are such restrictions that I can put on the table right now, but it is a question that I would like to just take away and delve into a little more and see, could there be certain specific areas where there seems to be similar type of restrictions?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Maxwell, do non-resident American companies pay tax in Kenya?
They do.
What kind of tax?
Corporate tax. You pay corporate tax. Actually, there are several taxes.
At the same rate as Kenyan companies?
Oh, yes.
As even those that are resident here?
Oh, yes.
So there's a corporate income tax that they're paying. And of course, if there's VAT to the transactions and the digital services tax. So what would be the difference, or what was the digital services tax?
So the digital services tax was applying, or is applying,
it's
because
currently
that's
still applying. Yes.
Yeah, it's applying to gross revenues on transactions done on the digital platforms and digital space. So same impact. You're shaving off 1.5% of the gross revenue, right?
But still at the end, once you do your computations, then you come at the point of income and interest, you'll still pay, your profit, you'll still pay the tax on profit.
Correct. Your corporate
tax.
Your corporate tax
will still apply.
Yes, exactly.
So, but the digital services tax is a global concept, isn't it?
It is a global concept. However, it's a concept that does not yet have consensus. If you look at the OECD process, they're trying to find a mechanism that would make it easier to have a unified regime when it comes to taxing the digital space. So there's a two-pillar framework that is being explored. It's not yet been concluded. One of the undertakings that we had from our summit last year was that the government would align itself to the two-pillar framework once that has been concluded. And so currently what we are seeing is individual countries coming up with these digital service taxes at varying levels, which is problematic for business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there some taxes that resident companies pay that non-resident companies don't pay?
I would need to look into that. It is possible. It is possible. I'll need to look into that and just, figure out what that could be.
What would be the justification for introducing the significant economic presence tax on non-resident companies? And then tax it at 6%. What would it be? The justification maybe would be because these others who are resident here are paying X, and you don't get to pay. So we're trying to rope you into a tax contribution. Is there a possible logic justification that could be heading in that direction?
Even with the digital services tax, that was
the logic. That's the logic.
Yeah. That's the logic, yeah. If you're deriving economic benefit from a jurisdiction, then you need to contribute tax. The challenge with that tax head is that it's a bit problematic, and it's a deep topic. I must admit I'm not an expert in it, but it is a bit problematic in terms of how do you determine value, and then how do you tax that value.
Yeah.
What portion of it is actually derived within the country, and what portion of it we would say is existing elsewhere. So it does become a bit difficult to administer.
So what contribution then is being made by these companies that are present in Kenya towards the investment portfolio that we've seen the ministry then try to achieve? And even as we look at that, what would be the straw that broke the camel's back, proverbially here, if it got to the point where guys are saying, okay, you know what, we're not able to operate like this anymore, and then essentially pack up and leave? So how would those two play with each other?
I'll simplify this for you.
Okay.
We are not, as a country, in isolation. We're not existing in isolation. We're actually in competition with other countries for investment. So the logical thing would be to try and make your investment climate as favorable as possible, so that you're able to attract as many of these dollars, as many of these companies as possible to set up here and operate. Why is that a good thing for Kenya? Because you're able to spur economic growth, you're able to get in the forex that you're looking for, you're able to create jobs, you're able to generally raise the quality of life of your citizenry. The flip side of that is, if you don't make it easy for those companies to thrive, or you don't make it easy for companies to land into your jurisdiction, then in essence, you've lost out on that opportunity. And I think trade and investment is a powerful tool when it comes to driving economic growth and performance for any country, for that matter, not just a developing country such as ours. So that is what I would say to your question.
Okay. What would then bring about a situation whereby there is the realization that obviously this environment that you talk about then has not been created, and there's when we've heard the threat, we're going to move to a neighboring country, we're going to do that, the other thing. What will get to that point whereby it's just too much, and we're saying, okay, then perhaps that presence will disappear?
It's a math situation. It's dollars and cents, right? Yeah. If it's costing you more to operate in a jurisdiction than you are actually deriving economic benefit from it, then naturally it becomes a very easy decision. Because companies exist to create value, and to create value for their shareholders as well. So if that is not happening, if the situation is such that it's becoming increasingly difficult for you to operate in that jurisdiction, then it becomes a very simple decision to make. We are not there. We are certainly not there, and I don't think that we want to get there. And so we need to just, it's a little bit of configuration that we need to make so that we can really get the takeoff that we want with respect to foreign direct investment, but also make those companies that are already here feel comfortable enough, thrive enough for them to reinvest and expand their operations. Indeed, they are our biggest advocates when it comes to attracting investment that is not currently here.
Yeah. So you've seen Kenya's ambassador to the US ambassador to Kenya, one and the same, very good man. And when we hosted her here, she was talking about giving her own example and her own experience. When she was heading HP, she would spend just a little bit of time looking at Africa, and then she'd focus on the other business areas where she'd consider growth for her business. But now she's telling American companies, guys, this is the place to go, and the place to land is Kenya. So, is that increasing the number of calls that you're receiving at AmCham with American companies and investors seeking to understand more about Kenya? You said you offer market information. Are you getting more inquiries?
Absolutely.
Into Kenya?
Absolutely. And I have to tip my hat to Ambassador Meg Whitman. She's done a phenomenal job of just positioning Kenya as the gateway for American investment into Kenya, into the region, and into Africa. And it is a clear champion and a fantastic partner for us at AmCham. The inquiries are growing. The interest is certainly there. The AmCham Business Summit had well over 150 US companies come in. Why? Because they wanted to hear more. They wanted to explore potential that Kenya has and the region has. When we were in the States, we co-hosted a forum at the U.S. Chamber, a U.S.-Kenya Business Forum. Again, very well attended. The president was there and gave remarks. The vice president of the U.S. was there. The secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, was there as well. All this signals the interest that is there on Kenya as a probable investment destination and the gateway to the region and Africa. And our role is to be that interlocutor that would help accelerate the velocity with which these companies would be able to get into the country.
The 150 companies that came for the 2024 AmCham Business Summit, and they were here, they were seeking to understand and want to feel the environment. What are the main questions that they came with? Or what was the main perception that they came with when they were landing to Kenya? What are the main questions that they were asking when they were in Nairobi?
Yeah, it's always so interesting, the response and the reaction for foreigners who've not been to Kenya, who are coming in with a certain perception that we all know. I mean, you're getting into an African country, you're not really expecting much. And then you land here, and the infrastructure that hits you, is comparable, and even in some instances better than some of the infrastructure we see in the West. So you're coming in with that mindset. Then you get in and you realize that, wait a minute, there is something here. And, if I was to echo Meg's own sentiments, when she came and started paying attention to what is happening locally, it opens your eyes to the immense possibilities that are there across all manner of sectors in the country. So we are seeing interest in manufacturing. We're seeing interest in agro-processing. We're seeing interest in technology. Technology will always be a big one, especially given Kenya's own play and positioning as the Silicon Savannah. We're seeing interest in renewable energy. We're seeing interest in health, and health both from a medical diagnostics side as well as the pharmaceutical side of the industry. So the questions that they were asking, the questions that they were asking were, what are the hot sectors to pay attention to? What is the policy and regulatory environment like? What sort of support can we get to enable us set up and get going in the shortest period possible? Market size, trying to understand a little more the nuances around various segments of the market. What can potentially be a proper market entry strategy if you're getting into the health space, for example, and so on and so forth. So that's in essence what we were addressing through various panels and of course in the one-on-one engagements that we had.
What fruit do you see that bearing? I mean, it's obvious that, businesses are here, they're doing the thing, they're getting on. But when we look at long-term benefits for both countries, whether it's the individual businesses that are doing their thing, or then when you look at the macro level now and what it means, what kind of fruit do you think that this could bear potentially in the next 5, 10, mid-term, long-term period?
I think it's prosperity. It's shared prosperity. Let me use that, drop that word in there. Shared prosperity. Business looks for opportunity. Plain and simple. Business will follow opportunity. If we can present the opportunities, and the opportunities are there, we know that for a fact, given the interest and the various studies that have been done.
Yeah.
So they are there. The question then is, if you are able to unlock those opportunities for business, what then becomes the benefit for the country, for the citizenry, and so on? And my view on that is simple. I'm going to answer this by asking a question, a rhetorical question, actually. What do we want? What do we want as a country?
You have to define very many things there, from who we are and then what we want.
Exactly. But if we were to throw some words around prosperity, economic growth, we want to lift the quality of life of people, of the Wananchi. Then the next question would be, how do you logically do that? And I am submitting that trade and investment is a powerful vehicle that we can use to realize those objectives. Now, if we can get more of that to happen in Kenya, we're able to create the prosperity we are looking for. From an economic growth perspective, we are able to create jobs for our youth. Very important. And through that, then we are able to generally raise the quality of life of our citizenry. That is what, for me, would be the vision 5, 10 years from now. Now, it's a process. We are promoting Kenya as a favorable investment destination. Companies have come, there's been roadshows last year, there's the state visit and the various business forums that the president engaged with, and as well the local private sector and the US private sector. But remember, there's a cycle to making investment decisions. It's not instant. So we had it today and said tomorrow to go up. No. That typically is a 3-5 year cycle.
So you've got to maintain the same story over those 5 years.
Exactly.
Otherwise, if year 3 you start changing the story, then you start introducing doubt.
Spot on.
Okay. Something else. Kenyan and Kenyan-based businesses accessing the American market. AGOA has been there for many years. It's coming to an end. It's been renewed. We've got the negotiations for the strategic trade and investment protocol coming up. But then, okay, let me start the question from, does AmCham collaborate with Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry? And does also AmCham promote this AGOA as a route? You come and invest maybe in apparel, textile, agro-processing, and you have access not just to the local market, but also to back home in the American market.
Spot on again. We, as I said earlier, are part of the local private sector. We are members of KEPSA. We collaborate with the likes of KNCCI, that you've talked about, Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We collaborate with other foreign chambers, the British Chamber, the German Chamber, and so on. So it's an ecosystem that is trying to achieve the same thing when you think about it. And so we do work collaboratively with those, to answer your first question.
Okay.
To your second question, yes, we provide that information. We encourage companies to look at Kenya, and indeed that is happening as we speak, where you have US companies coming up, setting up, for example, in the EPZ zones or the special economic zones for the US market, employing Kenyans, paying taxes here, product heading out to the US market. You know, I'm sure you probably know that Levi, Calvin Klein, and so on actually sourced from Kenya, sold into the US market. So yeah, I think that is possible. It's happening. It's something that we would like to see more of.
But Maxwell, we've barely scratched the surface
in terms of potential.
Over 2 decades of AGOA.
Yes.
Right? And yet we have done what? Less than 10% of what is available as a pipeline for Kenya, for Africa, just for Kenya, into the American market. What's been the challenge, the hindrance? Is it lack of information, lack of awareness, lack of sufficient money to invest? What is it?
It's all those things. It's all those things, Eric. AGOA is not the problem. AGOA is the solution. The problem is us. We need to figure out how we can deepen and take advantage of opportunities such as the ones that AGOA is presenting. There's a lack of awareness, yes. There are entities that are trying to, or programs that are trying to create more awareness and support companies to be AGOA ready. But then, if you are in business, how do you go about your business development? How do you go about expanding markets for yourself? It behooves you to go out and find or get as much information as possible on what potential opportunities exist for you. Having discovered that, there's 6,400 potential market opportunities in terms of product lines under AGOA, then how can I, as a business person, align my strengths and my offering to take advantage of that? Right? I think that responsibility is on business. It is not necessarily on government. There's always this talk about government should do more on this. Government has gone and negotiated and created a platform for you.
I agree. It's on business.
It's on business.
And you guys are the ones who have the information and you support the business. So when you see that they have not taken advantage, we come back to you and say, AmCham, when you say you provide market information and then we're not seeing this being taken up, is it because AmCham is not actually providing sufficient market information to show the potential for AGOA?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, because it is possible that we've not reached out as far as we should. No, because we also need businesses to come out and say, hey, we've heard of this.
We are looking
looking for information.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if they don't ask the right questions, then you'll not give them the right answers, basically.
Yeah. And remember, it's a partnership, right? It's a partnership here. Okay. And so you can't cover and you can't know each and every business out there that would be looking for opportunities under AGOA.
All right. Well said. Maxwell, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And you'll come again soon for more conversations, right?
All right.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.